didn't plan to talk about that Halloween again. For years, I tried to let it dissolve into the blur of other autumn nights. Pumpkins, porch lights, kids running in plastic masks. But lately, the memories have started to move again. It happens when I'm driving home at dusk, when the streetlights flicker on one by one. A single chill crawls down my arms, like someone just whispered that same line I heard that night. Nice costume. It wasn't even directed at me, but somehow it was. That's when I realized what unsettled me most about Halloween isn't ghosts or monsters. It's the way real people use the holiday as camouflage. Everyone's disguised, everyone's out late, and for one night, the line between safety and danger gets impossibly thin. The first time it happened, I thought I was just paranoid, but small details stayed wrong, the way a pair of boots kept turning up behind us, no matter which block we turned down, or how the same van appeared in 3 different neighborhoods that night. Then there were the moments that didn't belong at all. A voice that called from behind a row of carved pumpkins. A figure that didn't join any group of kids, but just watched. They linger in your mind long after the candy wrappers and decorations are gone. Sometimes I catch myself replaying that soft metallic sound, footsteps on pavement, that pause when you do, the shuffle of someone trying to time their walk with yours. At the time I told myself it was coincidence, that I was imagining patterns. But fear has a way of sharpening your senses until the smallest noises feel surgical. You hear a leaf scrape the asphalt, and your pulse spikes. You smell latex and sweat mixed with the cold air, and for a second, you can picture someone's breath just inches behind your neck. That year, every story I heard after midnight seemed to echo the same rhythm: people who went out for fun, laughter, candy, and came home with something else trailing them. Maybe it was just a feeling, or maybe it was proof that someone had been there all along, just beyond the light. There's one image I still can't erase. A porch bulb flickering above a carved pumpkin, the light catching on a gloved hand as it disappears behind a fence. It's burned into my mind like an old film frame that won't fade. The older I get, the more I understand that what happened wasn't one nightmare, but several different people, different towns, but the same heartbeat of dread running through them. I used to think Halloween made people act crazy. Now I think it simply lets them show who they really are. The masks don't hide evil. They give it permission, and that's what haunts me most, how normal everything looked right before it turned. So, if you're listening, and if the air outside your window feels too still tonight, just remember, sometimes the scariest things don't wait for darkness, they wait for October 31st, when you're too distracted by laughter and costume lights to notice the eyes already watching you. Because that was the night it all began. That Halloween night, I was 22. My sister Savannah had begged me to come along while she took her little boy Jackson trick-or-treating. I didn't really want to go. I had outgrown costumes and candy, but she insisted, said she'd feel safer with me there since her husband was working the late shift. The air that evening had that dry leaf dust smell that only October carries, and every porch glowed orange from plastic pumpkins and string lights. Jackson was dressed as a little firefighter, clutching his candy bucket so tightly his knuckles turned white. Savannah walked a few steps ahead, her phone flashlight swinging gently over the sidewalk. At first, everything was perfectly ordinary: groups of kids running between houses, parents chatting, the occasional laugh echoing across the street. But around the 3rd block, I started noticing a figure behind us. He, or maybe it was a woman, I couldn't tell, wore a long black coat that brushed the tops of heavy boots. A dark hood covered most of the head, and under the porch lights, I caught the faint gleam of what looked like a tactical vest. It wasn't a normal costume. There was no cartoon mask or fake blood, just this cold, matte black gear that didn't belong among superheroes and princesses. Every time we stopped at a house, the figure stopped too. Every time we crossed the street, they crossed a moment later. I told myself it was just another parent keeping distance. But the way they moved, slow, deliberate, like they were waiting for something, made my stomach tighten. When Savannah turned to ask if we should circle back toward home, I said yes, trying to sound casual. We walked a few more minutes before I looked again and saw the figure was closer now, maybe 20 feet behind. My breath shortened. I whispered to Savannah, "Don't turn around, just keep walking." She glanced anyway, and I saw her expression freeze. Jackson asked why we were going faster, but she just squeezed his hand and told him there was more candy ahead. At the next corner, the figure finally spoke. A woman's voice, calm but sharp, cut through the cool air. "Hey, hold up!" We froze. She stepped under a streetlight, and I saw her face partly hidden by a black tactical mask. "I'm with the department," she said, showing something that looked like a badge. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. You all shouldn't be out here." I remember how my instincts split in two. Part of me wanted to believe her because believing meant safety. The other part screamed that none of this felt right. Savannah asked which department, but the woman didn't answer. Instead, she scanned the street, then tapped her earpiece. Within seconds, 4 more figures in the same dark gear appeared from opposite directions, boots thudding in perfect rhythm. They stopped in a half circle around us, their faces hidden. Jackson whimpered, and Savannah knelt to hold him close. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought they'd hear it. The woman told us again to head home, that they were handling something. I wanted to ask for ID, but when one of the others adjusted what looked like a real rifle slung across his shoulder, I shut my mouth. We turned slowly and walked the other way, our backs burning from the sense of being watched. When we reached the next block, Savannah whispered, "They're gone, right?" I looked over my shoulder, nothing. The street was empty, except for scattered candy wrappers. That should have been the end of it. But later, as we drove back to Savannah's apartment, I spotted a dark SUV idling near the entrance to her complex. Its headlights were off. When we passed, it rolled forward a few feet, then stopped again. I didn't mention it because I didn't want to scare her more. I just told her to lock every window, to call me if anything felt off. 2 days later, she sent me a text at midnight. Someone left an envelope under my door. Inside was a single printed photo, our car from that night. The license plate circled in red. No note, no explanation. Just proof that someone had followed us all the way home. We called the police, but by the time they came, the envelope was gone. The officer looked skeptical, said it was probably a prank. But I know what I saw. Those weren't pranksters. Their movements were too disciplined, their silence too rehearsed. Weeks afterward, whenever I left the apartment at night, I felt it again, that pressure of being observed, of someone cataloging my every step. Once, I found fresh footprints in the thin layer of dust on the back staircase, larger than mine, leading up to the fire exit. Months passed before I could walk down a street without glancing behind me every few seconds. Even now, every Halloween, when I see kids in tactical outfits or black hoods, my stomach knots. I think about that woman's voice, the authority in it, and how easily we obeyed. It's strange how quickly fear can disguise itself as safety, how easily you hand over trust when someone uses the right words. Sometimes I wonder if they were testing something that night, a rehearsal for something bigger. Or maybe we just crossed paths with people who like the thrill of control. Either way, every year when October rolls around, I hear that voice again in my head, calm and cold, telling us to go home. And I still don't know whether she was protecting us or hunting us. When I was 12, Halloween meant nothing but excitement, hay rides, candy, the smell of bonfires that clung to your clothes until morning. My family had gone to a small resort in the mountains that year, a place famous for its fall festivals. They had a pumpkin patch, a corn maze, and the main attraction, the haunted hayride that looped through the woods. The idea of being scared but safe thrilled me. That night, I went with my cousin Megan, who was 13, just old enough to think she wasn't scared of anything. We were wrapped in cheap glow bracelets and carried plastic pumpkin buckets for candy. Parents sat by the fire pit drinking cider. Kids ran between the cabins laughing. It all looked perfect. When the hayride started, the tractors pulled long wagons filled with hay bales, and families huddled close under blankets. Actors in costumes jumped out from the trees with fake chainsaws and rubber masks. Everyone screamed, then laughed. But halfway through, between the second and third station, I noticed a man standing off the trail beyond the colored lights. He wasn't part of the show. I could tell because his clothes didn't match the theme. No blood makeup, no glow paint, just a dark jacket and jeans. He wasn't scaring anyone, just watching. At first I thought maybe he was staff or someone's dad waiting, but every time the wagon moved forward, I could still see him, pacing slowly through the trees. His face stayed in shadow, but I caught a glint from his belt buckle whenever the headlights swept by. Megan whispered, "You see him too?" And that's when my stomach dropped, realizing it wasn't my imagination. When the tractor stopped for the next scene, the man stepped closer. The actor, pretending to be a zombie, broke character long enough to glance at him and frown. Then he disappeared back into the script, probably thinking he was just another guest. The ride ended near the bonfire, everyone laughing, tossing hay out of their shoes. I tried to forget him, but later, when we were in line for caramel apples, I saw him again leaning against a tree at the edge of the light. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't doing anything but staring in our direction. I tugged at Megan's sleeve and she turned pale. "Let's go back to the cabin," she said, pretending to be bored, but I heard the tremor in her voice. We cut through the back path between the cabins, our plastic buckets clattering with candy. The woods were quiet now, except for the wind pushing dead leaves across the ground. I remember the exact sound, dry, restless, like whispers chasing our ankles. When we were about halfway, I heard branches crunch behind us. Megan stopped. "It's just another family," I tried to say. But before I could finish, someone stepped out from behind a tree. It was him. He smiled then, and it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind that tightens the air around you, makes it hard to breathe. He crouched slightly, hands in his pockets, and said, "Hey kids, I've got something for you." His voice was wrong, too slow, like he was choosing each word carefully. He pulled something shiny from his pocket. For a second, I thought it was a knife, but it was candy. A handful of wrapped chocolate. "Dropped these earlier," he said. "Want them back?" He took a step closer. Megan grabbed my wrist so hard her nails dug into my skin. "No thanks," she said, dragging me backward. The man tilted his head, his smile fading, and whispered, "Don't be rude." Then he lunged forward just enough to make us run. We bolted through the trees, branches whipping at our faces. I could hear him behind us, his footsteps heavy but controlled, like he wasn't chasing to catch, just to keep us running. The light from the bonfire flickered through the trees ahead, and we sprinted toward it, bursting out of the dark and nearly crashing into a staff member. We tried to explain, but our words tripped over each other. The staff looked around, called out, then grabbed a flashlight and checked the woods. Nothing. The man was gone. When our parents arrived, they assumed it was an actor who'd gone too far. But when the manager checked, all staff were accounted for. Not one of them wore a plain dark jacket. That night, my dad double-locked the cabin door and left a lamp on. Megan cried silently beside me, pretending to be asleep. I stared at the window for hours, expecting to see a shadow move across it. I told myself that even if he was still out there, we were safe now, surrounded by people, guarded, locked in. But right around midnight, the power went out. Just for a few seconds, maybe 10 at most, but it was long enough. When the lights flickered back, I saw something outside the reflection of a man's silhouette standing near the woodpile, turned toward our cabin. The next morning, we found footprints in the mud under that same window. Adult-sized, deep enough to show he'd been standing there for a while. The resort staff brushed it off, said maybe it was from a worker. My parents didn't argue, they just packed early and drove home before lunch. None of us spoke about it again. Years later, I searched online for incidents at that resort. Nothing. No reports, no arrests, no follow-up. But on a small forum for true crime enthusiasts, I found a post from someone who said they'd been to that same place a year later. They described a man in a dark jacket lurking near the hayride, offering candy to kids who strayed from the group. No one ever caught him. The post ended with a single line that still makes my blood go cold. He waits until the laughter gets loud, because that's when no one notices the footsteps behind them. I still love autumn. The smell of burning leaves, the echo of laughter under porch lights. But every time I hear the crunch of dry branches, or see a man standing too still at the edge of a crowd, I remember that night in the woods, the one that taught me monsters don't hide under beds. They walk among us, waiting for the moment when we mistake curiosity for safety. Roger was never the type to scare easily. He was 29 that Halloween, living alone in a quiet duplex at the edge of town. The kind of place where you hear the same dog barking every morning and the same mail truck rattling by at noon. It was his first Halloween since his girlfriend had moved out, and he'd planned on keeping it simple, handing out candy, maybe watching a movie, going to bed early. Around 7, the first groups of kids came by. He complimented costumes, dropped handfuls of chocolate into buckets, and smiled when the smaller ones yelled thank you in voices muffled by masks. By 9, the street had gone mostly silent, just the hum of porch lights and the occasional flicker of a candle behind a carved pumpkin. He closed the door, turned off the porch light, and settled on the couch with a blanket and the faint smell of candle wax lingering in the air. The wind outside was rising, tossing dead leaves against the window like fingernails tapping on glass. He muted the TV for a second, just listening. Somewhere down the block, a screen door banged once, then again, as if caught in the wind. Then came the sound that froze him, a soft, deliberate knock. Not the playful rap of a kid asking for candy, but something slower, almost rhythmic. Roger hesitated. He turned off the porch light, and his bowl of candy was already empty. Probably teenagers messing around, he muttered. He waited, but the knocking came again, louder, now from the side door that led to the backyard. He wasn't expecting anyone. No one ever used that entrance except him. The motion light above it should have flicked on, but it stayed dark. He got up, heart beating fast but steady, and walked to the kitchen. Through the narrow window beside the door, he could see the faint outline of someone standing there, a figure in a cheap, pale mask. The kind you buy last minute at a dollar store. It wasn't a ghost mask or a clown, just a blank face with hollow eyes. The person didn't move. Roger flicked the light switch inside. Nothing. The bulb had burned out. He tried to sound firm, louder than he felt. Hey, we're done for the night. Try next door. Silence. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering whether to respond. Then the handle turned slowly, testing the lock. Roger stumbled back, grabbing his phone from the counter, hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He dialed 911, but didn't hit call yet. He wanted to be sure this wasn't some Halloween prank before making it official. I said, "Go away," he shouted, and for a few seconds, everything was still. Then came the metallic click of something hard brushing against the door frame. He leaned closer, listening. It sounded like metal scraping wood, then a quiet grunt. The door trembled, once, twice. He hit call. The dispatcher's calm voice barely cut through the noise in his head as he explained what was happening. They told him to stay inside, keep the line open, and lock himself somewhere safe. He moved to the living room, every step echoing in his ears. That's when he heard glass shatter. The small basement window, the one near the laundry machines. He could hear someone crawling through, dragging against the frame. He ducked behind the couch, whispering to the dispatcher. He's inside. She told him officers were on their way, but the nearest patrol was at least 10 minutes out. He could hear footsteps on the basement stairs, slow and deliberate, the tread of someone careful not to make noise. Roger grabbed a fire poker from beside the fireplace and crouched lower. The footsteps paused at the door that led from the basement to the hall. Then, a voice raspy, almost amused, said, "You left the light on for me." The doorknob turned, but the lock held. Roger backed away until his shoulders hit the wall. His phone buzzed. The dispatcher was still speaking, asking for details, but he couldn't make out the words. Every nerve in his body screamed that if the lock gave way, it would already be too late. The doorknob rattled once more, then stopped. Silence again, heavy and endless. Minutes dragged by before he heard the first siren in the distance. Relief began to flicker through him until a faint thud came from behind, near the back window. The man had moved outside again, circling the house like a predator, testing weak points. Roger peered out just in time to see him crouched by the basement window, staring up. Even from inside, he could see the man's chest rising and falling, the rhythm of controlled breathing. Then the stranger smiled, raised a gloved finger to his lips, and disappeared into the dark. When the police arrived, 2 cruisers lit the street in blue and red. Officers swept the yard, found the shattered window, and spotted footprints leading toward the woods behind the property. They found something else too, a small backpack hidden under the porch. Inside were plastic zip ties, a roll of duct tape, a hunting knife, and a handgun wrapped in cloth. One of the officers looked at Roger and said quietly, "He wasn't here to rob you." The words hit harder than any scream could have. They stayed until almost 3 in the morning, dusting for prints, taking statements. The man had left no fingerprints, no identifying marks, nothing that could trace him. Roger tried to sleep after they left, but couldn't. Every creak of the floor sounded like a step. Every gust of wind against the house felt like a hand testing the walls. By dawn, he'd packed a bag and left for his brother's place across town. He didn't go back for a week. When he finally did, the house felt different. The air was thicker, the silence unnatural. He replaced the locks, boarded up the basement window, and installed motion sensors. But no matter how secure he made it, the unease never left. A week later, he got a call from one of the officers who had been on scene. They'd checked nearby security cameras and found footage of the man walking through the neighborhood that night, stopping at several houses, staring at doors, then moving on. No one else had reported a break-in. Just him. Maybe he picked wrong, the officer said. But Roger didn't believe that. Sometimes, late at night, when he's lying in bed and the wind pushes against the siding, he still hears that slow, deliberate knock replaying in his head. Not loud, just enough to make his pulse quicken, enough to remind him that someone out there had once stood a few inches away, deciding whether or not to come inside. And even though years have passed, Halloween still makes his throat tighten. Every mask on a stranger's face looks too still. Every knock on a neighbor's door sounds too patient, because what haunted Roger most wasn't the night itself, or even the man who came for him. It was realizing how easily that line between safety and violation could vanish. All it took was one door, one lock, and a quiet decision from someone who wanted to see what fear really looked like. Maybe that's the real curse of Halloween, not the ghosts or the costumes or the flickering lights, but the way it reminds us how thin the walls are between normal life and something unthinkable. Every story I've heard since that night begins the same way. Laughter, candy, comfort, the illusion of safety. Then something small shifts a stranger's stare, lingers too long. Footsteps echo half a second behind yours, or a shadow stays still when it should move. And suddenly, you realize that what's hunting you isn't supernatural at all. It's just another human, using the chaos of the night to hide in plain sight. The older I get, the more I think that's why we dress up, to trick ourselves into believing that fear is fun, that we control it. But some fears don't need masks. They wait for the right hour, the right silence, the right heartbeat. Every October, as the air turns dry and the leaves start whispering across the pavement, I feel that same pulse of unease in my chest. I see porch lights flicker and wonder who's really walking the streets, who's watching from the edge of the crowd. Maybe it's nobody. Maybe it's someone who's been waiting a long time to be noticed. And when the last knock fades and the laughter dies, all that's left are the echoes, the sound of a door closing, a lock turning, a heart that won't slow down. So, when you blow out your candle tonight and the room goes dark, listen closely to what's left. The wind might be just wind. The creak might be just old wood. Or maybe, just maybe, it's something that's been following you home for years, patient enough to wait until you stop pretending you don't believe.